God's Word Express.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're continuing our deep dive series into the gifts of the Holy Spirit, pulling from that really powerful teaching by Pastor Dr. Kamik Cowan Akaratiti.
Our mission today is really laser focused, and it's critical for you to grasp this. We are dissecting the big theological divide in Christianity today over these spiritual gifts.
Are they still active, or are they just historical footnotes?
Exactly. We need to compare the different theological views, really examine the notorious church in Corinth, and define precisely how that authentic divine power, the dunamis, functions compared to just, human wisdom.
And I think if you walk away with one definitive piece of knowledge from this dive, it should be this. Spiritual gifts are not optional, they're not accessories, and they are definitely not rewards for being mature.
No.
They are essential core supernatural power given by God to get non-ordinary results.
That's absolutely right. And understanding that difference, the difference between a natural human-made program and a genuine supernatural ability, that's the key to this whole discussion.
So let's start right there with that divide, because if you've attended different kinds of churches, you've probably seen some radically different approaches to the idea of the miraculous.
Oh, you certainly have. The fundamental conflict, it's rooted in something called cessationism.
Cessationism.
Yeah. It's the conviction, and it's held by many conservative Christian groups, including large Baptist denominations, that the supernatural sign gifts just ceased. They stopped entirely after the apostolic age.
And the logic there is that these big miraculous demonstrations were only needed at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
To sort of authenticate and launch the early church.
Precisely. Once the apostles died and the New Testament was complete, the thinking goes, the need for all those flashy signs ended.
So what does that look like in practice?
Well, it leads to this practical outworking where cessationist churches tend to focus on relying on intellectual, strategic, and purely rational methods for growth. The focus is all on high-quality study of the Word, strategic planning, detailed curricula, all human-engineered.
But hold on, doesn't that just sound responsible?
Yeah.
I mean, isn't having a strategy and using your intellect just good stewardship? Why would relying on smart human thinking be a problem?
Because the source material views relying solely on human strength as trying to solve a supernatural problem with natural tools. Strategy is good, of course, but it can't substitute for divine power. If you only focus on logic and planning, you're basically denying the need for God's ability to work through you.
Okay, so let's flip that coin. We've got the Pentecostal and charismatic movements, which wholeheartedly believe in the ongoing manifestation of spiritual gifts, healing, tongues, prophecy all happening today.
They do.
But the sources we're looking at provide a critique even within those groups.
Yes, and this is where it gets really nuanced. Even in churches that officially believe the gifts are active, they might functionally suppress them.
Why? Why would they do that?
Well, because the gifts can be messy. It might be a fear of making people, the middle-class attendees, uncomfortable, or it could be a commitment to a really strict, tightly scheduled service that's more about production or entertainment than allowing silence and space for the Spirit to actually move.
So they replace the power with a program.
That's the danger, yeah. When churches prioritize these dense, human-learned programs over giving the Spirit an opportunity, they often end up just substituting human wisdom for divine dunamis. And according to the sources, relying on that human wisdom to tackle real spiritual challenges is seen as foolishness. It just fails to get those non-ordinary supernatural results God intends.
That transition from wisdom to power, it leads us directly to the church that arguably defines this whole discussion. Corinth.
Oh, yes. Corinth.
It's constantly labeled the most fleshly church in the New Testament, and critics will point to its problems and say, see, spiritual gifts just lead to chaos and carnality.
Yeah, but that argument just completely ignores the astonishingly dark and chaotic context of the city itself. You have to know the history of Corinth to get why those first Christians struggled so much.
Okay, so give us those details. What was this city actually like?
No, Corinth was unique. It was originally destroyed by the Romans in 146 BC, just sat in ruins for a full century.
100 years, wow.
Yeah. Then it was strategically rebuilt by Julius Caesar in 44 BC as a Roman colony. And its location was everything. It was on this narrow land bridge connecting North and South Greece, a huge international trade hub between two major seas.
So a very important place economically, but who did Caesar get to actually live there?
And that's the absolute key. To populate these ruins, Caesar offered a deal that attracted people with nothing left to lose free land and immediate freedom for veterans, the poor, and this is the most significant part, slaves and former criminals.
So the founding population wasn't exactly sophisticated.
Not at all. They were essentially roughnecks, thugs, and the uneducated of the Roman Empire. They were a population starting from an extremely low moral base.
And we know how that played out.
Oh, it became notorious. Corinth's #1 industry was the sex industry and just rampant immorality. They worshipped the goddess Aphrodite, and historical records suggest 1,000 temple prostitutes operated in the city.
1,000.
1,000. The city's reputation was so bad that in Roman theater, if a writer needed a slur for a drunk, crude, morally debased person, they'd call him an Acorinthian.
Wow. So when Paul shows up and starts his ministry, the first Christians he's getting are these lawless, immoral people.
Exactly. The incest, the infighting, the lawsuits, all those deep problems weren't caused by the spiritual gifts. Those problems were the direct result of their deeply ingrained fleshly nature, which they carried straight into the church. The spiritual gifts, the charis, that was the very thing meant to help them escape all that impurity.
That context just completely reframes the whole argument.
Right.
And it leads us to Paul's method in Corinth, which was so different from his failure somewhere else.
Right, let's trace Paul's steps. Before Corinth, he went to Athens. Now, Athens was the academic powerhouse. It was all about philosophy, debate, logic.
The intellectual capital.
Totally. And Paul tried to preach there using these highly persuasive intellectual arguments. The result? Minimal. The source notes he didn't plant a major church in Athens at all.
So he used human wisdom in the place of human wisdom and got almost nowhere.
Right. But in deeply immoral Corinth, where logic wasn't the main currency, he shifted his strategy completely.
He had to.
He had to. In 1 Corinthians 2.4, Paul makes this incredible declaration. His teaching in Corinth was explicitly not based on persuasive words of human wisdom. Instead, he said he relied on the demonstration of the Spirit and power.
And that word power, that's where this overwhelming force comes in. It's the Greek term dynamis.
Dunamis. It's the root of our word, dynamite, but it means so much more than just an explosion. It signifies an overwhelming, unstoppable natural force like a destructive tidal wave, a massive flood that cannot be stopped, or a conquering army. That is the kind of supernatural power needed for ministry.
I can see now why the source labels relying only on intellect as foolishness. If you're trying to reach a city like Corinth, using strategic plans and smart arguments is like bringing your bare hands to tear down a concrete building. It's just insufficient.
It's operating in a totally different dimension. The church needs dunamis to accomplish non-ordinary results.
So let's get deeper into how that dunamis was demonstrated. Paul said his ministry was confirmed by specific signs. This is in 2 Corinthians 12.12, and it's supported by 3 distinct types of events, all built on that foundation of endurance or patience.
The first type of confirmation is signs, or semeion in the Greek. These are events specifically designed to confirm and prove the truth of the gospel message. They're proof of divine authority.
Can you give us a concrete example of what that looks like?
Of course. The source describes a scenario where, say, there's a teaching about honoring your parents, which promises prosperity. And then right after, unexpected financial miracles or business breakthroughs happen in the lives of the people who immediately acted on that teaching. The miracle, the semeion, confirms the truth of the principle.
That makes it really tangible. Okay, the second type is wonders, or teres. How is that different from a sign?
Teres are events whose main purpose is to cause an immediate reaction of amazement, shock, confusion, even speechless astonishment. They are unmistakable, undeniable supernatural events that defy any natural explanation.
So like a shock and awe event.
Exactly. The source gives a striking example of an experienced Christian husband who was just utterly confused and stunned, speechless, when he saw a successful and undeniable exorcism performed on his own wife. He knew all the theology, but the reality of the teres just overwhelmed his natural understanding.
So semeion confirms the message, teres evokes awe. That brings us to the third type. Mighty deeds or miracles.
And this third type uses that powerful term we just defined, dunamis. Here, it means producing results that are explicitly not ordinary. If you are operating in dunamis, your results shouldn't look like ordinary success. The proof, for Paul, was his ministry. He planted many, many thriving churches. That result is a stark contrast to his intellectual effort in Athens, where the result was practically zero.
That really is the ultimate measurable difference. Okay, let's pivot to the source of all these abilities. Grace. The Greek word charis is fundamental here.
Charis. We often treat it as this gentle, abstract idea of unmerited favor. But if you look at how it was used in ancient Greek literature, charis was a special touch from a god that specifically gave someone a supernatural ability.
It sounds almost like a divine empowerment. Like in a
Yeah.
video game, you don't just get a pat on the back, you get a level up or a spell that lets you do something you couldn't do before, like suddenly fly or lift a car.
That analogy perfectly captures it. Charis enables a person to perform tasks far beyond their natural capabilities. It's the source of those examples. The person who can't sing suddenly leading worship miraculously, or someone who's never played piano suddenly playing skillfully, or healing the sick.
So this ability is practical,
Yeah.
not just theoretical. And this leads to a really crucial point about its tangibility, I guess.
It does. This is a huge takeaway from the source. Charis, this grace or gift, is never quiet, invisible, or without results. The external evidence, the manifestation, it has to be visible and undeniable.
What happens if it doesn't produce results?
Well, Paul addresses this directly. He says the grace given to him was not useless. And the Greek word for useless is kinos, meaning empty, void, without result. If you've been granted charis, it must produce results in the physical world. If you claim a gift but there are no measurable, non-ordinary results, that grace, by definition, has been made kinos.
Which brings us right back to the paradox of Corinth. The most carnal church, yet they were overflowing with these results.
They really were. 1 Corinthians 1.5 says they were enriched in everything, using the term enpenti, which means in every little detail. They were rich beyond counting. The word Paul uses for rich is plutizo, the same term Plato used to describe King Midas, who turned everything to gold.
So they were spiritually and materially wealthy, even though they were still struggling so much with sin and maturity.
Absolutely. They had so many spiritual gifts, words of wisdom, knowledge, prophecy, discernment, that Paul had to dedicate a huge part of his letter, 1 Corinthians 14, just to regulate their use of the gifts, not to tell them the gifts were invalid. The inescapable conclusion is that God grants grace, charis, even to the immature, because it's a gift based on his power, not a reward for our perfection.
So if the gift is given regardless of our merit, what's our responsibility once we get it?
Paul gives us the answer. He talks about the grace of God being with him. The Greek word he uses is son, which means partnership. Yes, you have to be a willing, active partner with the grace given to you. The Spirit provides the ability, but you have to cooperate. You have to give the Spirit the opportunity to move.
In other words, if you suppress the gift out of fear, or you try to manage it with a human program, you're failing to partner with the charis.
Correct. You have the potential for dunamis, but if you fail to cooperate, you render that gift kinos useless, and you won't produce the results it was intended for.
That idea of partnership just connects everything, from the dangers of cessationism to the power in Corinth. This dive has really only scratched the surface of the gifts mentioned in the source material.
It's a huge field. In the future, we'll need to explore the specific classifications. The 9 gifts of the Spirit from 1 Corinthians 12, the 7 service gifts in Romans 12, like ministry and teaching, and the 5 Christ-given ministry gifts from Ephesians 4, like apostles and prophets.
So to summarize the core findings from today, spiritual gifts are essential. They're supernatural power, the dunamis given as an undeserved divine touch, the charis. And crucially, they must be partnered with to produce measurable, non-ordinary results in your life and your ministry.
So the final thought for you to take away is this. If you believe you have been given grace, that charis, that supernatural ability, what undeniable results are you actively cooperating with the Spirit to produce in your world?
Finally, we both hope that this message has blessed your spirit in one way or another. That's all from us for today. God bless you.